Hi everyone, my name is Maddie, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my quarterly kind of stats wrap-up reading goal update video. So this is a new thing I want to do this year, just every 3 months, kind of do an overview of how I feel like my reading is going so far, lots of stats which we'll rattle through, as well as just a general assessment about how I'm feeling about my reading, some kind of comparison to how it was going at this point last year, that kind of thing. So starting very generally, I'm really happy with my reading so far this year. At the beginning of the year, I wasn't reading that much and I expected that to be my new norm. I just started a new job, I didn't have a lot of spare time. I was really expecting to just not be reading very much at all this year, and that's fine if that had been the case. Luckily, I have found my footing with my job and found I actually have more time to read than I anticipated, and I've been able to read a decent amount, which is really exciting. And I know this is going to come and go throughout the year. For example, I know for the next 2 or 3 months I have so much on, and so I may not read very much, but these few months it's gone really well. I've been reading good books, I've been reading a lot more than I expected, I've just been having a really good time with my reading. I've done very well with sticking to my TBRs, I've completed all 3 of my TBRs for January through to March. It's been really successful and I'm really happy about it. So we're going to get into the stats, and then I am also in this video going to do a mini kind of end of the year video. So at the end of the year I do my favorites and my least favorites, and I'm going to do that briefly here, just pick out a couple books I really want to talk about or have something notable to say, just because not all of these books will make it to those videos at the end of the year. There are 3 more quarters of the year to go, and so some of these may well not make those lists, but I feel like they're worth talking about. And also some of them are books that are coming out in the next couple months, so I want to talk about them now. But let's do the stats first. I will chat to this video, so if you want to not see the stats and just see that discussion, you can skip that down at the bottom. But we're going to start with stats. So the majority of these stats I do only have for this year. A couple I have also calculated for 2020 at this point last year so that I could do a comparison. I've not done it for everything because there's not enough hours in the day for me to do that, but you know, I've done what I can. I am also reading them off sheets of paper. I tried to make this really professional and just memorize them all, but there's 3 whole pages of stats. I'm not remembering all those numbers, so apologies for reading them off a sheet of paper. It is what it is. So starting point, really basic. How many books have I read so far this year? The answer to that question is 38. At this point last year I had read 31. Not wildly different. So I did not expect to be saying I'd read 38. I read, I think, 7 in January, 11 in February, and then 19 in March, I think are the numbers. So big steep incline. March is an anomaly. I will never again read 19 books in a month, I do not think. That was just an exciting one-off. But yeah, it's going up, I'm getting to grips with my reading, really good number so far. And I will say though, especially in March, a lot of those books were very short, which is shown by the number of pages I've read so far this year, which is 10,929. That is almost 2,000 ahead of where I was last year because I was on 9,090. So again, really good, really happy with that. But it does work out as an average book length of 288. Which is really short, way shorter than what I would actually consider the average length of book that I read. I would say the average length of book that I read is 300 to 400 pages, somewhere in that range. So 288 is definitely way below that, and that's due to the fact I've read quite a few graphic novels, which are like 150 pages, and I had a whole week where I read 8 novellas, which were all under 200 pages. So that's why that has been really skewed. I've also not read very many really long books. I've read quite a lot, like normal, in the 300 to 400 range, but because I've not read that many longer and I have read a lot shorter, that average has dropped way down. I don't care what that average is, but I just thought I'd mention that as it's really not representative of what I actually read. I will also say that this works out as 121 pages a day, which I'm very happy with because my goal is always to read an average of 100 pages a day. I actually didn't set myself that goal this year. I very specifically didn't, but it's in the back of my mind and I kind of still want to hit it. So happy to have continued with that level. But whilst talking about pages and page count and kind of what I was saying about that average being skewed, I thought I would just run through how many books I've actually read in that kind of categories. So I've read 3 books that are over 600 pages long. I've read no books between 500 and 600. I've read 6 books between 400 and 500. 10 books between 300 and 400. As I said, it's normally my biggest chunk. I've read 4 between 200 and 300. 13 between 100 and 200, which is all of the graphic novels and novellas, and then 2 that are under 100, which are some like really short, extra short stories for some of my favorite series. So big variety, skewing towards middle and lower end, which, you know, is what it is for now. I don't mind it. And then finally on this kind of page number topic, the longest book I've read so far this year is Dreams of Gods and Monsters by Laini Taylor, which is at 652 pages. And the shortest is The Stars and Everything in Between by Victoria Lee, which is a novella for the Feverwake series, coming in at 38 pages, just a little Kindle novella extra thing. So getting into sort of the actual content of the books, we are going to start with genre. I always say that my genre split is like mainly fantasy, followed quite closely by contemporary. That is reflected here, though I have been leaning more towards fantasy recently, just by coincidence, books I need to read for books clubs and things like that. And doing the tour novellas, they're all sci-fi fantasy. So I've just had a few more sci-fi fantasy recently than contemporary. I'm sure that will shift at some point. It always does. They kind of fluctuate back and forth every 6 months or so. But again, I don't mind. I don't try and pick up books to fit these stats. I just find it interesting to look at later. So just to run through, firstly with the like sci-fi fantasy side, I read 11 fantasy books, 5 sci-fi, 6 dystopian and 2 speculative fictions. And then on the kind of contemporary and other side, I read 6 contemporary books, 3 romance books, 3 historical and 2 non-fiction. So quite a wide variety of genres there. I'll put like a pie chart up to show that split, and I'm gonna have like cool toned for sci-fi fantasy and warm toned for contemporary and other, so you can see like where that split's happening. I'm pretty happy with it. I love that I read a wide variety of genres, so I'm very content with this. Next up for intended audience, I always say I read about 50-50 adult and YA. My lord, has that not happened? It was relatively close to 50-50 in the first 2 months of the year. And then in March, I read almost exclusively adult, just by, you know, coincidence. It's what I picked up, it's what I read. I don't try and pick up 50-50, it's just normally what I end up with. But I will say I'm quite excited to see myself picking up more adult, not because I dislike YA, I'm not actively trying to move away from YA, nothing like that. But I felt intimidated by adult for a really long time, so I'm really excited that I'm now obviously feeling that less, considering how much of it I'm picking up. So of the 38 books I read, 28 were aimed at adults, 1 was new adult, 8 were YA, and 1 was middle grade. So yeah, that sounds about right. I wish there were more new adult. There probably are within the ones I've read, but it's not an official category half the time. But I had 1 book which I just could not place in adult or YA, so I had to just put new adult on my stats. All the others I just class as adult or YA. Then in terms of star rating, this is where it's a little bit disappointing. I am still working out my star ratings. They're moving down gradually. But the thing I found a little bit disappointing is that I've had 8 5-star reads this year so far, which isn't awful, but like 3 of them were rereads, so I think I've only had 5 new 5-star this year, which isn't as many as I would like, but you know, it's not the end of the world. I then have had 19 4-stars. There are definitely some of those which should be ranked as 3, and I'm sure at some point in the year I will go back through my spreadsheet and move some of those, but I'm not too fussed about it. They are what they are for now. It's what I rated them originally. I'm still working on giving a book a 3-star and not feeling guilty about it, so I'm sure some of those 4s will switch down later in the year. I did then give 6 3-stars and 3 2-stars. So not too bad, but not ideal. One other stat I just find interesting is 8 out of the 38 books I've read so far this year are arcs, which is just interesting. I didn't realize that would be so many. I felt like I've only read a really small handful of arcs. So 8 out of 38, not far off a quarter. I'm quite surprised by that. The next and kind of final stat I have about the actual books is when they were published. So I'm always intrigued to know if I'm reading really new releases or if I'm reading slightly older releases. Just out of interest, I don't really mind. I tend to feel like I'm reading more new releases, but I just like knowing if I am also reading some backlist. So I have read 11 books which were published in 2021. I read 9 books in 2020, which is what I'd expect, just, you know, a little bit earlier. Then read 6 books from 2019 and 3 books from 2018. Past that, because the numbers got much smaller, I have started grouping years. So between 2015 and 2017, I've read 7 books in that window. And then between 2000 and 2015, I've read 1, and then pre-2000, I have read 1. So variety, again, as expected, most concentrated in books releasing this year, quite a lot from the last year, a relatively big chunk from the year before, so grouped within the last 3 years or so, that makes perfect sense to me. So then the one other thing which I'm trying to keep in mind this year is reading books I've hauled. And this, I set out with the goal this year of, by the end of the year, having read at least half of the books I've read this year. I will not achieve that because you guys are wonderful. I have received so many books from you guys from my wish list, but I've therefore received a lot more books than I can realistically read, especially as I'm quite limited in my reading by book clubs and read-alongs and stuff and having to keep up with those. So my goal was also to make sure the number of books I read and the number I receive are the same. So I've read 38 books, but I have received 53, so those numbers are definitely not equitable. And I'm still working my way through reading quite a lot of them, but not all of them, and probably not even half of them will be read this year. So far, I have read 19 of them, which is 33%, so it's a third, which is really not bad, I'm not gonna lie. I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. But, you know, I'm still shooting for that 50%, I just don't think it'll happen. So just like where I got these books from, because I find it really interesting, 25 of them were sent to me from my wish list from you guys, 15 I bought from myself from like Waterstones and Amazon and things like that. 14 of them were sent to me from publishers, and that includes NetGalley and eArcs as well as like other books. I then had 2 from Illumicrate and 1 which was just like a gift from my mum. And grand total, I don't track this as like keeping myself in line, I find it interesting. Grand total, I have spent £152 on books this year, which is actually surprisingly tiny considering I've gained 53 books. It is just incredible. So thank you again to all of you who have sent me something. I truly, truly appreciate it. So that's all the stats. That's where we're at. I'm happy with all of them, honestly. Generally a big variety in things I'm reading, pretty on par with what I would expect. Nothing completely out of the ordinary other than a lot of small books because of the 1 week where I read all tiny books. But I guess now is a good time to quickly go into kind of talking about the books I feel are worth noting. Okay, so starting off with notable books that I really, really enjoyed. We're gonna just go through these in the order I read them in the year. First being One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This does come out in June, it is not out yet, I do apologise, but please pre-order it. This was a phenomenal new adult kind of contemporary with a slight sci-fi twist story. It follows August, who's really pessimistic and like doesn't believe in love and all of this, and she goes to New York where she thinks she's going to find lots of like-minded people and moves in with this adorable group of characters who become like massive found family for her, and she meets a girl on the train who makes her think maybe she does believe in love, or maybe at least she should. And then they find out that this girl is actually trapped out of her own time. She's from the 70s or 80s and is trapped on the train. And it's brilliant. The characters are amazing. The story was fascinating. The sci-fi aspect was done so well, like so well. I often find, or sometimes find in a contemporary story where they have like a small time travel element, they just ignore all the parts of it that wouldn't work and kind of go with it. This was really well done. Very impressed. Characters, story, writing, romance, brilliant, all on par, loved it. I knew I would. It's Casey McQuiston. Highly recommend you check it out and pre-order it for June because it is truly such a fun and great read. I will absolutely be getting a physical copy and likely rereading it in June when it comes out. Next up, I'm going to talk about these two together, and they are The Fever King and The Electric Hair by Victoria Lee. These are the 2 books in the Feverweight duology. There are also 2 novellas, but these are the core books. I love these books. Oh my freaking god. I read The Fever King when it came out in 2019, I want to say. Yes, 2019. That's when I first read this book and I adored it. It was a 5-star for me. I thought it was amazing. But when the sequel came out in 2020, I didn't get around to reading it because I felt like I needed to reread The Fever King first. So I finally did. I reread The Fever King and it's still absolutely a 5-star book. This is phenomenal. This is a dystopian, YA kind of dystopian story following a futuristic America where this virus has got out, kind of pandemic style, and this virus will very likely kill you. However, if you survive it, you end up with magic, like literal magic, which is taken from some form, something you're good at. So, such an interesting concept. My favorite thing about this, I've mentioned, I have a whole vlog reading these 2 books and the novellas if you want to check it out. But my favorite thing about this is just you don't know who to trust. It is mind-bending, it fucks with your brain, and it's brilliant. So really loved this one. The sequel was just as good, if not better. It's very different. This is very fast-paced. This is much slower-paced. but I feel like it worked extremely well and they complemented each other really well, as this was dealing with more intricate things and much more intricate and complex emotions instead of just being like a rompy kind of book. Both phenomenal. This is a new favourite series. I'm not even a new favourite series because I knew I already loved the first one, but it is a favourite series for sure. It's gone right on my favourite shelf. I love this author so much and I cannot wait for their next book, which is coming out this year. I'm so excited. So yes, 5 stars to both, loved them. The next 5-star book I read, I actually read as an ARC, but it has now come out, and that is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. If you've watched many of my videos before, you will probably know that I love the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert, which starts with Get Alive Chloe Brown, continues with Take a Hint Danny Brown, and then ends with Act Your Age Eve Brown. This is a phenomenal romance series, all featuring diverse Black women as the main characters. So in the first book, Chloe has chronic illness. In the second book, Danny is like in academia and she's bisexual. And in this, there is autism rep as well. Just phenomenal. It's all own voices rep. Talia Hibbert is a phenomenal author. The banter and the fun and the romance in all of these is extraordinary, along with these hard-hitting other parts of these stories and like the complexities of emotions and relationships, and it's just done amazingly. This is one of the funniest things I've ever read in my life. I laughed out loud the whole way through. It's brilliant. I will reread this whole series forever. I love them. Highly recommend you check this one out. And then the final book I want to talk about, I did feature quite prominently in another video where I read all the Tor novellas in a week, so I'll link that up there. It's chaptered so you can skip to the right part. And that is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This is also unfortunately not out yet. It is coming out in July. It's just beautiful. I cannot get over this book. I've talked about it in so many videos now and I'm going to continue to do so because I am obsessed with it. This is a kind of futuristic story where the world and humans have created robots who are completely self-intelligent, and it gets to a point where these robots decide to go out into the wilderness and live on their own because they no longer want to live in human society. They want to build their own society. And it's a while after that's happened. We're following a character called Dex who doesn't really know what they want to do with their lives. They're a traveling tea merchant. And these two things come together. Just, oh my God, I'm not over this book. The way Becky Chambers sums up these complex, fascinating societal things in one sentence that just left me reeling, and I'm still reeling a month later, was just extraordinary. She is truly masterful. It was absolutely beautiful. I've had so many existential crises about this book. Please read it when it comes out in July. It is amazing. I will be rereading it. I may even try and get a few people together and do a live show about it because I loved it, and I know Katie from Brightness Katie Reads has loved it and would happily reread, so we might try and do a thing because it's just so good and so worth it. So just very quickly to round out this video, I am really quickly going to talk through 3 books I was quite disappointed by this year or didn't really enjoy as much as I thought I would. The first being The Raven Tower by Anne Leckie. I gave this 2 stars. I really didn't like it. I do genuinely think I could really enjoy this on a reread, but it makes no sense. It would make sense on a reread because you've read the whole book and know what happens at the end, but it doesn't make any sense when you first read it, and it's really frustrating. It made no sense. The writing style was interesting, didn't actually mind it. I know a lot of people struggle with it. It just made no sense. It did nothing for me. 2 stars. That's all I have to say. Next is Love in English by Maria E. Andrew. Again, did nothing for me. This is a YA contemporary and it could be such an interesting thing. It's following a character who has moved to the USA, doesn't really speak a whole lot of English, and they're having to learn English whilst also like learning to adapt to life in the US and just being a teenager and everything that entails. And that could have been so interesting, and it was, but everything about this book was so dull. I did not care. I would have DNF'd it if it wasn't such a quick read that I knew I could read the whole thing in like 3 hours. I can't even describe why this annoyed me so much. I think it's partially, it's a much younger YA, which I don't always get on with, and it just didn't appeal. It just didn't appeal. I think I gave this a 3 because there's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. I'm sure it's a perfectly good book, it just did nothing for me. And then finally, The Factory Witches of Lowell by C.S. Mallorik. This is a little Tor novella, which I was really excited about. It holds the premise of this group of women who work in workhouses and they want to kind of revolt to get what they deserve. So better working conditions, better working hours, better wages, all of this. And witchcraft is a part of this. They kind of learn witchcraft. Could have been really good. I didn't care. Again, was quite bored, didn't really engage with it, didn't engage with any of the characters, couldn't tell them apart for love nor money. Honestly, the whole way through, there was a female-female relationship. I couldn't even tell you between which two characters because they were all so unidentifiable. And I didn't even care about that, which really says something when I don't care about the sapphic relationship. So yeah, we had some great books, we had some not so great books. That's always gonna be how it is. But overall, a really solid reading year so far that I have truly, truly enjoyed. So that's that. I'm gonna wrap this up now. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you like stats. If you did, please give it a like. Comment down below how your reading is going so far this year and any stats you wanna share. I'd love to know. Subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me. There are links down below to all of my other social media, as well as the read-alongs and book clubs that I host and the readathon I'm hosting in June. And there is also my wishlist and my Patreon if you want to check out any of those. But that is it for this video, so bye, and I'll see you in the next one.